So Helena, just because you've built it and Abraham and I haven't, give us a sense of what Aida does at the moment. Where have you got to with it, and keep it non-techie for me, if for no one else.
So, so let's build on what I said around AI's weaknesses, because that's really what's driven how we've approached this. What AI can do really, really well is mimic conversations. Okay, you're talking to a psychopath because it can't feel, but it mimics conversations. It can be empathetic, it can adjust, it can personalize. So from a sort of advice process, think about the conversational front end, and us using conversational AI for that. Text or voice. So whether that's sort of people speaking to it and then getting text responses back, or it actually having a conversation explaining, risk as an example. So there's a conversational front end, which is effectively, if you think about it, clients don't see what's in your brain as an advisor. They don't see the tools you're using as an advisor. They don't see how you're using their personal information. They speak to you. So that's the conversational front end. AI is pretty good at that. There's lots of, tweaks and things to do around it. You can change the tone, you can change how it approaches, you can teach it different conversational styles, but you can do a huge amount of that. But if you go into ChatGPT and, for example, say, how do I invest? It doesn't know anything about you. It knows some things, but it won't know and understand what financial details or actually, goal-based details, or what are you aiming to do? Is it the right thing for you to do? That's what we would call a fact find, but effectively it's knowing the person and responding based on that knowledge. Does that make sense? So that's the second sort of part of our system. So it's what data points are we gathering, how we gather them progressively, and how we get the model to use it. Does that make sense? So that feeds into the responses. Then we have the knowledge base, because I really think there's big limitations of large language models, because 40% of it comes from Reddit. Do you really want Reddit to be telling customers what to do with their money? Absolutely not. So we set out to build our own knowledge base, which is proprietary. That's what we took through the exam. So we, it includes behavioral finance, all the stuff that, we've learned as advisors over time. And it's very similar to taking an advisor through the CII exams. You don't whack them straight in front of a client. You build up their experience of how to use that customer data, how to sort of use that knowledge, and then be able to actually articulate something that makes sense to a customer's. Does that make sense? So that knowledge base is cool. It includes things like decision trees. Is this right? When does this work? When doesn't it work? So really being able to answer the questions in detail, but not drawing from Reddit. And then we have deterministic tools. That's basically whether it's a cash flow forecast or calculation or an outcome that we want to show them different scenarios. And effectively the front end, so the conversational part, pulls on all three of those to be able to respond to a consumer. So in the same way, an advisor wouldn't think to show everyone all the textbooks of what they've learned and all the tools they're using in the background and how they're using the information of what they gain from the customer, client. It works in the same way. So effectively, we've just looked at, okay, how does an advisor, interact with clients and try to recreate it? It won't be the same in some ways. In some ways, it'll be way better.
So is Aida out in the wild, so to speak? Is she dealing with? Sorry, I'm humanizing her already. Is she dealing with individuals? What's she doing? And what, I guess, what's the target for her?
So we're looking to integrate with large organizations, so particularly people who are building out targeted support and things like that, because the big flaw with us having a new shiny thing as an industry is that we think that shiny thing on its own is going to work. And the reality is it won't. If you have a limited journey where you're taking someone down with key data points, you're really going to be the same as just taking them for a tick box on a website to say, look at your retirement. And I don't see those calculators ever solving the advice gap or solving any problems for people. So we believe that engagement is key. So can you bring someone on that journey to actually helping them understand and then take them to a targeted support journey to get the right product solution? So we're looking to work with large organizations on that, but we also have the D2C side, because that's where we learn. So that's where we sort of learn from real consumers, see how they behave, what they do, and building that into our system.
Abraham and I last episode said, right, we're just going to abandon the advice gap. and financial advisors shouldn't be going anywhere near it. So what I'm hearing is we can just entirely leave it to your responsibility, essentially.
The thing that I find funny is that it's such a big gap, and we don't sort of see that. Will the future clients engage with us in the same way if we don't help them now? I mean, RDR did many things, but it also killed off the ability to help people with less money enormously. And I don't know about you, Matt, but I had plenty of clients who built up their wealth because the man from the Peru knocked on their door and gave them, you know, a 20 quid investment a month. And that was a starter for them. And if you fundamentally think about it, the core building blocks for wealth for people is income and spending. So the advice gap clients don't have a problem with finding investments. They have a problem of getting them to a place where they can actually invest well, build wealth, and do things in the right way. And if we don't create the wealth of the future, you know, that's gonna mean advisors won't. They'll still be clients. I'm being dramatic, but we shouldn't have such a big gap. And I think targeted support is going to be a bigger challenge for advisors than we think.
I disagree with you, Helena, and and I have a lot of questions that I want to do this. So, do you see Aida as addressing fundamentally, the advice gap? In other words, people who cannot, or for whatever reason, have access to a human financial advisor. And let's face it, financial advice only touches 6-7% of people in this country. So there's a huge gulf. And look, I'm going to offend some people, but I will. This is my assumption. The bottom third of people have no wealth of any kind. This is the ONS data. Have no wealth of any kind to deal with. Then you have the next third, whose wealth is made up largely of property assets and very little in liquid savings and investment as we would know it. They are, of course, building wealth in the workplace through the workplace savings scheme. And then, of course, you have let's say, the upper third who do have some assets, but financial advice, some unliquid investment, and they are still building wealth. But financial advice only touches the top, frankly, 6% of wealth in this country. So is your view that Aida is going to help those people who can't have access to human financial advisor? Or is your end game really to go after the client of human financial advisor? In other words, Shulmat and I, what's the word? Start writing our business exit strategy because you're going to come in and eat our lunch. And I am happy for any of this scenario. I just want to know.
I still own Smith & Waddle Financial Planning. I haven't sold out. Does that answer your question? Definitely.
Start off.
No, we're not after advisor clients.
Are you just being nice? Are you just giving me the answer, a response that AI will give me because it's appealing to my bias?
No, Abram, because there's always a but. So we're not going after advised clients. The market is huge. The need is huge. If you talk about building wealth in workplace, 25% of people stay in their default funds. So what opportunity cost is that for someone, because they're 20 or 30, they won't see someone until they have an oh shit moment in 55. That isn't right. We shouldn't sort of congratulate ourselves that we have this glory, pedestal that we're helping all these people, but we're screwing over tons of people who can't get access to help because they're going to influencers who's telling them to invest in crypto. That this isn't okay. What I think is a real challenge, and this is where I've thrown this question out and to obviously lose most of the room. But how do you actually think this is going to work if for the next 15 or 20 years Aida is helping customers, they build their wealth, that, they're getting to a nice chunky place, and somewhere they sort of seeing, okay, maybe I should sense check this with a human, but then they go and speak to a human advisor and the fees are 15, 20, 30 times more. And then they wait 5 days for an email, it takes 3 months to get something back. They've had everything instant all this time. And then they question, is it worth it? Now, I think that's going to happen in all service industries. I don't think we're unique. I think every single service industry is going to get disrupted in the same way Amazon and internet shopping disrupted retail. Like, if we sit here and say that's not going to happen, then I don't know, I'd question our intelligence, because it is going to happen, because things will move and people will adapt and they'll do things in a different way. I don't think it's the end of the human race. I don't think we all need to jack up the thought that we'll have a job and that kind of thing. I don't think it's that dramatic. But look how much our ways of communication has changed over the last 15 years. I do not take phone calls. Because I don't want to. And I'm like, no, people don't do that anymore. They do everything on text. So the world evolves. But I don't think it's always going to be necessarily as fast as we think in some ways. But I do think there's a real challenge that if a digital service is servicing someone at a really low cost in a very engaging way, will people see the value of speaking to a person instead if the cost is 20 or 30 times more? I think I would really question
The
that.
unequivocal answer from me is absolutely. I'll give you the counter to these views. So
Yeah.
first of all, what you're asking, I cannot do simply from a pure commercial point of view. So in other words, Matt running a boutique, armchair-based financial planning business, not that he's not a nice guy. I know he's a nice guy. I know he gives 10% of his profit to charity. He goes to church on Sunday. I remember calling him during COVID and I said, where are you, Matt? And he says to me, I'm in a church or something. But you're asking him to do what is commercially impossible, which is go after clients who cannot afford his service. I don't know how he does it commercially. That's point number one. And I don't know why you would be asking him to go after this, let's call it blue ocean strategy of underserved clients, because you should want to serve that. I love you going after that client segment to serve. Your question is a powerful one. I love the way you position it by questioning my intelligence, which is like, if someone is been dealing with Aida for 10, 15, 25 years and they do eventually build wealth, will they go and find a human financial advice? My answer is yes. You know why? Because complexity compounds as you build wealth. I have seen this, and we've seen this in business. When I started Timeline, I wanted to open an account with Barclays. They wouldn't give me an account. I wanted to open an account with any of the big guys. They wouldn't give me an account. When I raised, 1.6 million, whatever, I couldn't get an appointment from any of the big banks. So I went to the tiny little startup, banks, Revolut and what's the other one? The one I'm looking for, Sterling. They open an account, they got all these things, and then fast forward 3 years later, we got to a business that they just cannot serve because we have complexity in our business. We have money coming in from multiple platforms, and they're looking at this and saying, what is this? They do not have the capability to serve us at the price point that they've. And I held my nose when our CFO said, Abraham, I've got to go to one of the dreadful established banks. But we did. So my point is, people will grow complexity in their lives. And remember, the small IFA firm doesn't need hundreds and hundreds of clients. An advisor needs 60 households who can pay them, who can get, a great service from them. Unless you are my friend Pete Matthews is a Pete Matthew. There are a few others in the marketplace. I really don't know how the small advisor is going to go after this gap.
No, I agree, because you can't do it with humans. You've got to use technology. So I don't disagree with you there. And I'm not saying advisors should solve the advice gap, but what I'm saying is there will be a definite pressure on fees if you look at those two next to each other. So if I was an advice business, I would double down on the human aspect, because you're right. For some things, people still have personal trainers, even though they can go to the gym. You know, I'm not saying that's going to disappear, but if you put them like for like, and one is 30 times more, and the only difference is that you get to speak to someone, I think people will question that. So advisors can do a lot to create efficiencies. I have not seen that trickle down into fees.
Oh, absolutely. We haven't seen that.
That will happen.
Yeah, we haven't seen that, and I'll let Matt get a word in. But I totally agree with you. Matt and I, we did this thing in at the PFS where we said, show of hands, if you have seen 10% productivity in your business as a result of using technology, and something like 50% of the using AI and technology, and 50% of the room went up. And I'm thinking, no, I don't think so. It doesn't show up in the numbers. The growth in advice revenue is practically zero once you've extracted market. So there is no improvement in productivity. And I agree with you, though, that AI isn't coming to save advisor firm in the way that they think it is. It's not going to save you if you haven't got your pricing point right. It's not going to save you if your data is fragmented and all over the place. It has solved some low-hanging fruits. The one I can point to is meeting notes. It will probably help with things like suitability report preparation, but only if you have the data, integrated in a way that that makes sense, that is easy for AI. And I like the way you broke this down into the part that you're doing deterministically and the part that you're using AI to do. I can talk to you about all the things that we've been doing internally. We've had our own failed application of AI internally into internal process. We didn't spend 900 grand. You would be pleased to know. So there's a lot we agree on is likely to impact the business of advice.
Yeah, so I'm at the risk of being the vanilla one today. I am going to agree with both of you. I mean, I do think there is going to be a downward pressure on fees, on advisor fees. I don't think we've seen that yet, but I think we will see that at some stage, because you're right. You've got to be able to transition a client from a directed approach, a low cost directed, guided approach, into what is going to be a higher cost, fully advised approach. And that gap is easier to bridge if the price point gets closer. So that is true. I do also think, though, that your other point was around timescales. So when you transition from dealing with Aida to dealing with a financial advisor, you shouldn't have to wait 3 months for the information to be absorbed by the advisor and then replayed with the responses. And I would like us as a profession to aim for something better than being an evil, a necessary evil, which I think is what you described it as, Abraham, which is that transition to the big banks. We need to get better as financial advisors. We need to get slicker, faster, more tech-enabled, so that transition doesn't feel quite as clunky to those clients who will at some stage. I mean, it is the inevitable march of progress, isn't it? So we will get to a stage where we can't rely on clients inheriting money and us just going to go and see them and eat biscuits and drink tea. There will be clients that will start to want to transition from guided or targeted advice to fully advised. But we've got to bridge a bit of that gap between the two, the tech, the experience, the service, and then also probably a bit on the fees as well.